Though the idea of grabbing the brass ring remains as controversial today as it was way back when, WWE have never had such a hard-working roster. Now, WWE isn't quite the meritocracy its higher-ups would have you believe, but the wrestlers we're about to talk about have all worked out of their skin in 2018, but the card positions do vary greatly. Such is life in modern WWE. There are a lot of honourable mentions on such a crammed roster, so we acknowledge the omissions of Velveteen Dream Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, and the countless others who've done everything in their power to create their own opportunities over the past 12 months. But with all that out of the way, I'm Andy for WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 wrestlers who grabbed the brass ring in WWE in 2018. Number 10. Tommaso Ciampa. Ciampa is currently operating at a higher level than he has at any other point in his long career. He does benefit from the immense spotlight he's been given and the stellar Johnny Gargano problem, but his work rate cannot be understated. While injured, the former Sicilian psychopath sharpened, refined, and perfected his game, ensuring he'd eventually come back as a Marvel-caliber superhero, but probably more Thanos than Ultron. This continued when his comeback eventually came to fruition, and now he's one of the most convincing heels in the entire business. Those who caught Ciampa's late Ring of Honor run already knew that he was an effective bad guy, but he has soared beyond anyone's expectations in 2018. He understands his role better than the vast majority of wrestlers on WWE's books, and this, coupled with his own self-improvement drive, almost make the over-the-top greatest sports entertainer of all time title justifiable. Number 9. Chad Gable. You won't find a truer example of a wrestler who has done everything in his power to grab the brass ring this year but reaped only negligible benefits than poor wee Chad Gable. The former Olympian works as hard as anyone. He throws everything into every single performance, regardless of the spotlight, bringing live wire energy, enthusiasm, and a charismatic spark to otherwise dull affairs. Now, there's nothing special about his partnership with the distinctly unglorious Bobby Roode at the moment, but the palpable excitement that Gable brings to the table really does make them worth watching. That Chad is so consistently great in his limited opportunities should warrant a greater push, at least to the level of intercontinental contendership. But sadly, this may never be forthcoming. This marks him as one of the most underutilized men in the company, and he may eventually need to leave in order to fulfill his full ambitions. Number 8. Nikki Cross. Like the character or not, it's impossible to deny that Nikki hasn't poured everything she has into her 2018 performances, particularly through the divisive whodunit saga in NXT, during which Cross was placed in a bigger spotlight than ever before. A key piece in the revelation that Johnny Gargano was behind Aleister Black's ambush, Nikki rubbed shoulders with NXT's biggest and baddest. Handed some of the weirdest scripted material developmental has ever seen, her enthusiasm for the role helped make her one of Full Sail University's most popular acts. While her push remains middling, she's over as hell with the NXT audience. Now, Cross's future is a question mark. There's little doubt a gimmick like hers will be destroyed on the main roster. Nonetheless, there's no questioning her application in 2018, and her willingness to fully commit to such a wacky character suggests that she'll endure. Number 7. Mustafa Ali. A low-key cruiserweight classic highlight in 2016, Mustafa Ali has thrived since 205 Live went from Vince McMahon's Little Guy Raw to the Triple H-helmed work rate playground it should have been from day one. While Ali's WrestleMania 34 clash with Cedric Alexander was sullied by an on-the-nose heart versus soul narrative, his grimy back alley promos during the build revealed him as a surprisingly excellent talker. Mustafa's athletic talents were already known, but the 32-year-old really emerged as a three-dimensional performer during this time. Ali busts a gut every time he steps through the ropes. Highlighted by their fantastic no DQ scrap back in July, the Buddy Murphy series remains his finest work. It was excellent, but it really is hard to remember a time when an Ali match wasn't great. Whether or not his efforts will eventually result in an increased push on WWE's Cruiserweight show remains to be seen, but Mustafa has done everything in his power to push forward in 2018. Number 6. Daniel Bryan. Leave it to Daniel Bryan to take several ghoulish apron bumps on his very first night, back as an active competitor. Bryan's comeback announcement and the ensuing Sami Zayn-Kevin Owens beatdown will go down as one of 2018's best wrestling segments. Losing 3 years to chronic concussion issues should make most wrestlers trepidatious about getting dropped on their head ever again, let alone on the first night of their comeback tour, but not Daniel Bryan. He let Zayn and Owens absolutely destroy him, knowing that the heat would blow the roof off, particularly after such an emotionally charged promo, and guess what? Daniel Bryan's a genius, and it worked. The new WWE champion continues to empty the tank every time he wrestles. Clearly delighted to be back doing the thing he loves the most, there's a zest, a sense of life to Bryan's performances solely lacking anywhere else in the company. Even earlier this year, when his booking was less than perfect, his gusto meant that everything he did was a highlight, and now he's finally back on top, delivering awesome, show-stealing matches with the likes of Brock Lesnar and AJ Styles. Number 5. Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre is one of the best booked men in wrestling today. Now, this has no doubt helped him become what he has become, a future headliner, but the man himself is just as responsible for enhancing his own position, having undergone such an immense transformation over the past few years. Getting released from WWE was the best thing to ever happen to McIntyre. Cast into the independents, he took every opportunity to tweak every loose nut and bolt he could find, eventually returning to Vince McMahon's company much closer to the chosen one he was supposed to become all those years ago. Physically, he was a different beast, but it was McIntyre's newfound ability to project star power that means most in the sports entertainment world, and his reinvention has continued in 2018, with his work since graduating to the main roster nothing short of excellent. Now, the terrible Dogs of War phase shows that McIntyre already has an aptitude for transcending lame writing, and this will serve him really well going forward, particularly if he remains on Raw. He is a main eventer in the making. Expect him to keep sharpening and refining his game as time progresses, and for gold to come his way before long. Number 4. Ronda Rousey. Celebrity status meant that Ronda Rousey was always going to be pushed to the moon upon entering WWE. Now, the cynics suspected that she'd be pampered, overprotected, and handed the keys to the kingdom whether she worked hard for it or not. This bred resentment from the get-go, but far from joining the ranks of the quote-unquote do-nothing bitches that she stood against in the UFC, Rousey has proved herself a tireless worker. Ronda is doing this the right way. Yes, WWE have given her opportunities that wouldn't normally exist, but she is paying her dues. Let's look at the evidence. Rousey took several ring post bumps in her very first match. She sold for Stephanie McBloody Man at WrestleMania. She let Charlotte Flair unleash a very real, very painful assault on her at Survivor Series, putting the angle over the top as a result. And while many assumed she'd work a pathetic Brock Lesnar-esque road schedule, she's out there doing house shows with everyone else in the trenches, and the list goes on. Just because somebody comes in as a ready-made star doesn't mean they aren't a grafter. Throughout an astonishing rookie year, Rousey has not only proved herself one of wrestling's biggest naturals, but one of its hardest workers as well. Number 3. Buddy Murphy. Though his name almost certainly sat near the top of WWE's list of potential releases at the start of the year, Buddy Murphy's transformational 2018 makes him one of the most improved wrestlers in the world. The Cruiserweight Champion's upturn is largely self-made. Though he toiled in the wake of his split with Wesley Blake and was lost in the purgatory of NXT's Largo loop for what felt like an eternity, he hit 205 Live like a mortar. Post-weight cut, he was eventually established as the brand's resident grumpy powerhouse. WWE handed him an ideal niche, and Buddy made the most of it, fast rising as the brand's most must-see wrestler before completing the year's most unlikely success story with a huge cathartic title win on home territory at Super Showdown. Taking his show's top prize in Australia was a career highlight, and Murphy followed it up with an excellent defense against Mustafa Ali, his greatest rival. Now, it would have been easy for Murphy to let his head drop and just kind of rot away when he was removed from NXT television a couple of years ago, but instead, he has quietly rebuilt himself, and now he's finally bringing his progression to the international stage, justifying his place right here in the top 3. Number 2. Seth Rollins. Many people would have Seth Rollins succeed Roman Reigns as the guy while the big dog is away. Now, that does look unlikely with Braun Strowman and Drew McIntyre around, but no Raw superstar has done more to stand out in the ring than the Kingslayer in 2018. Rollins has grabbed the brass ring the old-fashioned way by consistently delivering good to great matches every time of asking. His Intercontinental title reigns have been characterized by such bouts, harking back to the days when the secondary strap was WWE's work rate belt, albeit on a slightly lesser scale, but not by much. Nonetheless, the passion with which his "burn it down" war cry is bellowed back by the audience during every entrance shows the extent of his incredible popularity. Now, like most of his main roster peers, Rollins has suffered from some inconsistent booking. The Dolph Ziggler saga was stretched out way too long. While the Shield's reunion was good for pops, it kind of hijacked his singles momentum. Nonetheless, it's hard to imagine him and Dean Ambrose delivering anything other than in-ring excellence however long their program lasts. And Rollins, well, he's just had an awesome year, hasn't he? Number 1. Becky Lynch. That Becky Lynch will finish 2018 as a leading Wrestler of the Year contender speaks volumes about her heel run, because the Irish Lass Kicker accomplished absolutely nothing prior to SummerSlam. None of this was her fault, but Becky's early year was listless. Fortunately, everything changed at the biggest party of the summer. Becky became the company's hottest act that night, and she hasn't slowed down since, having elevated every aspect of her performance since ditching the old underdog babyface persona and becoming the man, a cool, hard-edged anti-hero. The inspiration behind her transformation? A chat with none other than Shawn Michaels, who encouraged her to carry herself like the biggest star in the business when she went back after filming The Marine 6. It's safe to say Becky's done just that. Creative have moved Becky incredibly well since accepting that the fans were never going to boo her, but nonetheless, it's the performer's own swagger and gusto that makes her so special. Straight fire still exists, but it now manifests through a performer more akin to Stone Cold Steve Austin than anyone else on the roster, with the lovable loser of old now, fortunately, a distant memory. So that's our list, but which wrestlers do you think grabbed WWE's brass ring in 2018? Let us know down in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and then you can give me a follow on Twitter at Andy H. Murray if you're into that kind of thing. For now, I've been Andy, and I'll see you later.
Violent energy. Got a little McKenzie. Shooting forward into the knees of Jacob. Cleo in the elbow drop. The kamikaze catches. Wonder what a counter. And then they start once again. Defiant Wrestling is loaded.